When your own doctor tells you that you're dying, you believe him, especially when that doctor is your son-in-law. I can still hear Raymond's voice in my head, steady and cold, the way surgeons talk when they've already accepted the outcome. Stage 2 pancreatic cancer, Harold. I'm sorry. The air left my lungs. The walls of his office seemed to shrink. I remember gripping the edge of the desk just to stay upright. I asked him twice to repeat it because men my age don't die quietly. We need proof, numbers, something solid to fight. He handed me a printed report, like a death sentence wrapped in hospital ink. That night, I drove home through Chicago's steel gray streets with the radio off and the city looking like a place I no longer belonged to. I poured bourbon and couldn't drink it. I thought of my daughter, Jessica, and cruelest of all, I remembered the wedding I'd paid $100,000 for, smiling through toasts for the man who would soon try to bury me alive. My name is Harold L. Turner. I'm 59, a retired transit supervisor who still irons his shirts and polishes his shoes. I'm a widower. I still speak to my late wife, Evelyn, when I'm alone in the house, her photo set on the mantel so she can see the piano. I'm the kind of man who knows where every receipt is, and I keep promises even when no one remembers I made them. Until that day, I thought I understood cruelty. But betrayal that wears a white coat and calls you dad, that's a different species of cold. For weeks after the diagnosis, I moved like a ghost through a routine that used to feel like mine. I took the pills he gave me, tiny blue and white things that made my eyelids heavy but never my stomach sick. I let him press needles against my skin for vitamin infusions in his slick private clinic in the West Loop, where the parking lot glitters with imported cars, and the lobby smells like fresh lemons and expensive hope. He talked to me softly about managing expectations and setting affairs in order. He mentioned estate planning, and I nodded the way you nod when the undertaker asks your preference for flowers. I told myself he was helping because that's what family does. That's what I paid for in a way. The right to believe the man who married my child. You don't need to know every detail of our past to understand the shape of us. Jessica is my only child, my whole heart walking around in another person's body. She was 32 when she married Raymond Ellis, 34, handsome in a magazine way, with a surgeon's gait and perfectly trimmed beard. I met him at a Sunday dinner, baked chicken and collard greens, cornbread wrapped in a towel to stay warm. He took his coat off like a man entering a stage. He ate slowly, complimented me on the seasoning, told me about a life he'd saved that morning. Jess looked at him like he could lift thunderstorms with his bare hands. I wanted to like him. God knows I did. I even listened when he said, joking, not joking, that the public transit system could teach a lot from hospital administration. I laughed. Evelyn would have squeezed my knee under the table to keep me polite. The wedding was my gift. I spent years putting away what I could, a little extra in the retirement account, a second job repairing old Hammond organs for churches on the south side. When Jess said she wanted a ballroom with a view of the lake, live jazz, and a dress that would make her mother cry, I said yes before I did the math. The bill came to $100,000. Vendor contracts stacked like a phone book. I signed them all. At the reception, beneath crystal chandeliers that threw light like diamonds, I watched my daughter dance with the man who would one day put his palm on my shoulder and tell me my pancreas was killing me. He slipped in close and whispered, "Money doesn't buy class," the smile flicking at the corner of his mouth. I pretended I didn't hear him. I pretended a lot that night. We were a year into their marriage when my hands began to shake. Coffee trembled in the mug. The stairs left me breathless. It could have been age, or the winter, or grief sneaking back in its quiet shoes. Raymond kept his tone gentle. "Let me run a few tests, Dad, just to be safe." He had me in his office the next afternoon. He printed the report while I sat there listening to the hum of the machine. He didn't let me hold it long, just long enough to swallow the word cancer, long enough to feel myself shrink. And then I began to see the small patterns, the way his treatments left no bruise, the way I was drowsy without nausea, heavy without pain, how he discouraged second opinions with a hand on my arm and a concerned whisper. Stress accelerates decline. It's funny what saves a man. Sometimes it's not faith or luck or a miracle cure. Sometimes it's stubbornness and a city bus driver's habit of noticing every detail on the route. I saw the details, and then I did something he didn't expect from an obsolete man. I went to St. Joseph's and registered under my middle name, Leonard, and my mother's maiden name. I told the young nurse at the desk my story in a quiet voice and watched her posture change from routine to righteous. They ran every test I asked for, blood work, imaging, the whole 9 yards. The results came back clean. No malignancy. Pancreas, boring as a brick. Heart, strong. Lungs, clear as a winter morning over the lake. Relief rolled through me so hard my knees shook. Then came something else. Heavier and steadier, anger cooling into resolve. My son-in-law had faked my diagnosis. He had found the one place a man like me is softest, my love for my child, and aimed right there. Now, I need you to hear me for a second, not as a character in a story, but as a man talking to you across a kitchen table. Where are you listening from? Drop your city and state in the comments so I know where my neighbors are. Detroit, Birmingham, Spokane, Perth. Let me see you. And if you know someone who's been pushed into the corner by the very people they fed and clothed, hit subscribe so this story finds them. Maybe my voice can be a hand on their shoulder when the room goes quiet. That night, I sat alone in my Hyde Park living room, the old maple floors creaking in the familiar places, the piano lid reflecting the last light like a dark river. I pulled out the metal cash box from the closet, the one with Evelyn's handwriting on the envelopes, utilities, groceries, church, need as a school teacher. There was a note from her too, folded and crisp. Don't let anyone make you feel smaller than you are. I put the note in my breast pocket where it warmed against my skin. I opened a spiral notebook and began to write dates, times, medications, dosages, copies of the prescription labels, the names of the nurses who had glanced at me with sympathy in the clinic and then avoided my eyes. I wasn't going to confront him, not yet. Men like Raymond thrive on reaction. They control the room by stepping into your air. I would give him silence. I would give him my empty chair at the table and let him get comfortable with the space I left. When a man relaxes, you can see his true shape. But I had a plan that no one, not even myself, could have predicted. The next evening, I accepted an invitation to dinner at their place in Lincoln Park, the kind of townhouse that looks like it auditioned for a magazine, clean lines, art that whispers expensive, island counter big enough to land a helicopter. Jessica greeted me at the door in a soft gray sweater, the kind her mother used to fold with both hands like a blessing. She hugged me, and I felt the fracture lines in her stress, the way she held her breath before she spoke. You're early, she said. Raymond's finishing at the hospital. He'll be here soon. We cooked together like we used to, her chopping onions, me stirring marinara in a heavy pot. The house smelled like tomato and basil and something sweet from a candle. I listened while she talked about neighborhood things, the new cafe on Armitage with cinnamon rolls the size of a steering wheel, the couple next door expecting twins, the church around the corner where the choir director's mother just turned 92. Her laugh sounded tired. I wanted to ask if she was happy, but some questions are traps. They collapse the moment you step onto them. So I asked for the Parmesan. She handed it to me without looking up. That told me what I needed to know. Raymond arrived carrying an overnight bag and a conversation already in motion. Something about a surgical case and an incompetent intern. He kissed Jess on the cheek like he was checking a box, then turned toward me, slipping on his professional sympathy like a coat. How are you feeling today, Harold? Any pain? Any loss of appetite? He poured me a glass of red wine and set it at my place. I lifted it, let the light catch, then set it down untouched. Strangest thing, I said. I woke up hungry. That's good, he said. Enjoy the good days. He squeezed my shoulder, thumb pressing into the muscle the way trainers do at gyms. I watched him eat. I watched him talk. He didn't look at Jessica much. He did look at his phone. When dessert came, store-bought tiramisu plated like a restaurant, he brought up the house. Have you considered that trust we discussed? It would make things less complicated for Jessica when the time comes. There it was, that careful surgical phrasing. When the time comes, not if. I nodded, faintly. I've been thinking of selling the Hyde Park place, I said, casual as weather. Too big for one man. Might move somewhere quieter. He brightened just a fraction. A man smelling rain before a storm. Real estate's frothy. I can connect you with someone who'll move it fast. I smiled and cut my dessert. I'll keep that in mind. What I didn't say, the deed was already in motion. A week earlier, I'd met with Pastor Caldwell in the basement of New Trinity Baptist on 51st, the room with the cracked linoleum and the metal fan that rattles like a tambourine. He introduced me to a lawyer in the congregation, an older woman with eyes that could see through fog. Together, we drafted a life estate deed that let me live in my house until I died and left the remainder interest to the church's scholarship fund for kids who couldn't afford community college. My house would never be Raymond's, not even if I went quietly in my sleep. I wasn't reckless, not then. I kept paying my bills. I kept checking my blood pressure. I kept dressing in the mornings like a man with places to be. Wool slacks, polished Oxfords, a tie even if the only person who'd see it was the clerk at the corner store who saved me the last copy of the Tribune. I played the piano some nights, fingers remembering old hymns. When I finished, I'd look at Evelyn's photo and tell her what I'd done that day. She didn't answer, but sometimes the house felt less empty. A week after that dinner, I returned to Raymond's office with a plan so quiet it sounded like compliance. He explained a new treatment protocol, his voice dipping into tender places. "It's not standard," he said, "but I can get you into an off-label regimen if we manage the liability through some paperwork." He slid forms across the desk. I took out my reading glasses and balanced them on my nose the way my father did when he wanted to look harmless. I read every word. I asked 3 questions. 2 were real, 1 was bait. His answers were smooth, practiced. That told me what I needed to know. He'd done this before, or at least imagined it enough to have a script. I left and walked 3 blocks to a diner on Halsted with red vinyl booths that sigh when you sit down. Ordered coffee and a slice of cherry pie with too much whipped cream. I pulled out the St. Joseph's medical report from my coat pocket and laid it flat on the table. The waitress glanced at it as she poured. "Good news?" she asked. "The best," I said. She topped my cup and patted my shoulder in a way that almost undid me. I almost stopped there. Almost. But what I did instead shocked even me. That night, I called an old friend from the transit days and Reggie, who now fixed things the city didn't ask questions about. Reggie knew a guy in IT security who moonlighted as a guardian angel. 3 days later, that guardian angel sat in my living room, shoes off, laptop open, explaining in plain English what metadata was and how email headers tell the truth your eyes miss. I gave him copies of the test results Raymond had printed for me, the emails he'd sent after appointments, even the labels from the pill bottles. He typed like he was playing jazz. 2 hours later, he leaned back and whistled. "This report's been altered," he said, tapping the screen. "It's missing the hash that the lab system stamps at generation. And these emails? The timestamp's been massaged through a relay. Not amateur, but not bulletproof either. Can you prove it?" I asked, hearing my own voice sound like a man I had once been. Supervisor, problem solver, the one people called when the system jammed and commuters were snarling like alley dogs. "I can draw the dotted lines," he said. "You'll need a lawyer to ink them." I called Ms. Hightower, the church lawyer with fog-cutting eyes. She agreed to meet. She listened without blinking and took notes with a fountain pen that looked older than me. "Don't confront him yet," she said finally. "Keep collecting. A fraud this clean needs patience to dirty it." Patience I had. Fury too. But fury can be harnessed like electricity if you respect it. I went to appointments. I took the pills and tucked them under my tongue, spat them in the sink later, and saved 3 in a plastic bag. I asked for printouts. I asked innocent questions. Raymond's smile grew more confident each visit, the way a man relaxes into a lie that has rewarded him. He began to talk about what Jessica will need, emotionally and practically. He proposed moving me into a care apartment near their place to reduce stress on the family. He used the word family like a period. Final, unarguable. Looking back now, it was the exact second when revenge started breathing inside me. It was a small moment, easy to miss. Jessica had called to ask if I needed groceries. I told her I had enough in the pantry. She laughed and said, "Dad, you still keep beans like it's the 80s. Then she paused, voice softening. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Raymond was in the background, saying something about rounds the next morning. He didn't know what I knew. He didn't know I had copies of every altered report, that Reggie's friend had traced an IP address that shouldn't have touched my medical records, that Ms. Hightower was already drafting a sealed complaint with a judge who sang baritone next to Pastor Caldwell on Sundays. I stood at my window and watched the neighborhood move. Dog walkers, a boy learning to ride a bike, a couple arguing quietly near the corner where the bus slows. I put Evelyn's note on the windowsill so the light could find it, and then I wrote a letter to myself, dated and signed, the kind of letter a man writes when he wants a record of who he was before the storm starts. I folded it and slipped it into my inside coat pocket, right over my heart. The next morning, I walked into Raymond's clinic for a scheduled infusion. I wore my best navy suit, silk tie, and the cufflinks Evelyn gave me on our 20th anniversary. The receptionist greeted me by name, her smile small but sincere. "Dr. Ellis will be with you shortly," she said. I sat where I could see the hallway and the door to the back office. A delivery guy arrived with a box of supplies and signed something on a tablet. A nurse hurried past, eyes on the floor. Time slowed and sharpened like a blade coming into focus on a whetstone. Raymond appeared, coat unbuttoned, stethoscope draped just so. "Let's take a look," he said, ushering me in. The room smelled like lemon and latex. He began his script. I watched his hands, steady, confident, hands that had cut strangers open and saved them, hands that had touched my daughter's cheek, hands that had falsified my end. He reached for a clipboard. "We're going to adjust your dosage based on your latest lab work," he said. "Good," I answered, steady as a metronome. And then I'd like to talk about the trust paperwork. I've been thinking about what's best for Jessica. He smiled, and it was all teeth. I smiled back and reached into my coat pocket. My fingers closed on the envelope I had prepared, the one with 2 reports inside, his version and St. Joseph's. For a beat, I felt the city outside me like a pulse, train braking on iron, bus doors hissing, church bell marking the half hour. I laid the envelope on the counter between us. Before we do that, I said, there's something you should see. When you've been a supervisor for 3 decades, you learn how to let a man talk himself into trouble. Raymond didn't know that about me. He thought age had softened me, made me polite and slow. So when I placed that envelope on his counter, I did it like a man dropping a tip. No accusation, no heat. He glanced down at it, then back up. What's this? Something I'd like you to look over, I said. He opened it, expecting signatures or a consent form. Instead, his eyes met 2 lab reports, the one he'd given me, and the one from St. Joseph's. I watched the exact second his pupils narrowed. It was the look of a man realizing the ground beneath him isn't ground anymore. He recovered fast. There must be an error, he said, smiling in that polished way that's meant to disarm. 2 different hospitals, same date, same tests, I said. If it's an error, it's a talented one. He set the papers down carefully, as if they were explosives. Let me look into this, Harold. Sometimes labs mislabel. I didn't come here for another diagnosis, I interrupted. My voice was calm, but my hands were steady in a way they hadn't been for months. I came to give you a chance to fix this before it spreads beyond this office. He blinked, and for a heartbeat, the mask slipped. Not much, but enough. A tiny twitch at the corner of his mouth. Spreads, he repeated. Are you threatening me? No, I said. I'm offering you mercy. He leaned back, crossing his arms. You're confused. That hospital must have. Save it, I said quietly. You faked my results. You stole my trust. You were counting on me dying before I found out. The only thing you misdiagnosed was my patience. He looked like he wanted to speak but couldn't decide which mask to wear. Finally, he stood. I think we should stop this conversation before it goes somewhere regrettable. I smiled. It already has. I left without looking back. The nurse at the desk avoided my eyes. Maybe she knew. Maybe she'd known for a while. That night, I went home and played the piano for the first time in months. My fingers trembled on the keys, but the sound filled the room like oxygen. Evelyn's photo caught the lamplight, her smile frozen in the same soft defiance she had when she stood up to our landlord in 1987. I looked at her and said, I'm not done yet. But revenge is a long game. Anger can burn you clean or burn you hollow, and I wasn't planning to die of either. I needed strategy. The next morning, I went to Pastor Caldwell and told him everything. He didn't flinch. You've got your evidence, he said. Now you need your witness. He gave me a name, Sister Marlene, a retired nurse who'd volunteered at the free clinic downtown for 30 years. She knows the system, he said, and she's got more fight in her than most judges. Sister Marlene's apartment smelled like lavender and disinfectant. She wore her hair in tight gray curls and had a voice like gravel wrapped in honey. I showed her the documents. She read them slowly, then looked up. He used a falsified EMR template, she said. Classic pattern, probably printed from a test patient record and edited before export. Amateur work for a doctor. Honestly, she tapped the page. He left the timestamp metadata. You can't erase that without access to the root database. I stared at her, trying to follow. Meaning, she said. We can prove he never ordered these tests. That was the first real breath I'd taken since this began. Over the next week, she and Mrs. Hightower worked quietly. They traced digital footprints, compared document headers, and pulled state medical board data. Every breadcrumb led to Raymond. Every attempt he'd made to cover his tracks had only left another print in the snow. Meanwhile, I kept up my act. I called him for updates. I pretended to be tired. I even thanked him for taking care of everything. He sounded relieved, like a man who thought the danger had passed. That's the problem with arrogance. It makes you deaf to the sound of your own undoing. One afternoon, Jessica stopped by unexpectedly. She brought groceries, fresh fruit, bread, her mother's favorite jam. She sat on the couch, fidgeting with her ring. Ray said you've been a little confused lately, she began. Forgetting things, getting angry. I froze mid-step. Angry about what? She hesitated. He said you accused him of lying about something. Dad, please tell me you didn't. I sat down across from her. Her eyes were the same green as Evelyn's, and they softened me even as the words cut. Jess, I said gently, when did you stop believing me? Don't say that, she whispered. Then listen, I said. I'm not sick. Not the way he told me. I have proof. She laughed, the kind of nervous laugh people use when they're afraid to look at the truth. Dad, please. Raymond's a doctor, and I'm your father, I said. One of us has more to lose by lying. She stood. You've always had trouble trusting people. That's what liars say when they're about to get caught, I said quietly. She left in tears. I let her go. Sometimes, the only way to wake someone up is to let them dream too long. That night, I called Mrs. Hightower. He's turning her against me, I said. Let him, she replied. The higher he climbs, the harder the fall. We're almost there. 3 days later, she called with news. The board's investigator wants a formal complaint. They'll need you to make a statement. I hesitated. That'll destroy him. Didn't he try to destroy you first? She was right. Still, revenge doesn't feel as sweet when the price is your daughter's peace. But dignity has a cost too, and I'd paid enough already. We filed the report. Quietly. No noise, no headlines. The investigator, a tall man named Renfro with the patience of a librarian, came to my house and recorded my testimony. He listened to everything without interruption, only nodding occasionally. When I finished, he said, You've built a clean case. This will go to review within a week. A week. I'd waited longer for a bus in February, but Raymond sensed something. He started calling more often, his tone tighter, his questions sharper. How have you been feeling? You've been talking to anyone? Seen any other doctors? He was circling. Predators can smell when the air changes, so I threw him off the scent. You were right, I told him over the phone. I'm tired. I think I'll sign over the house soon, make things easier. He hesitated, then exhaled. That's good, Harold. You're making the right choice. Can you come by tomorrow? I asked. Help me with the papers. Of course. That night, I cleaned the house like a man preparing for inspection, polished the silver, dusted the piano, even set out Evelyn's teacups. I wanted everything to look ordinary, but on the dining table, beneath the neat stack of paperwork, sat a small digital recorder, hidden beneath a linen napkin. The next morning, Raymond arrived dressed for success. Gray suit, cufflinks, that same unflappable calm. How are we feeling today? He asked, the way you ask a patient you already wrote off. Ready? I said. Let's make it official. He opened his briefcase, pulled out a sheaf of documents, and started explaining each page. Trust agreements, property transfers, beneficiary designations. I nodded, signing where he pointed, letting him think the play was his. Then, casually, I asked, Tell me something, son. Why'd you pick pancreatic cancer? He paused, pen in hand. What do you mean? Out of all the organs you could have chosen, I said softly. Why that one? He chuckled, but his eyes didn't. Harold, what are you talking about? I leaned forward, elbows on the table. I went to St. Joseph's. The smile fell off his face like a dropped mask. They ran the same tests, I continued. Twice. No cancer. Not even a shadow. But you already knew that, didn't you? He stared at me, calculating. Then he stood. This conversation's over. Not yet, I said. I just want to know one thing. Did Jessica know? That one landed. His jaw tightened. You need help, Harold. I had help, I said. From people who still believe truth matters. He grabbed his briefcase, muttering something about delusions. I let him go. The recorder caught every word. By the time he reached the door, I said quietly, You forgot your copy. He turned. I held up an envelope. Inside it, the unaltered report, the falsified one, and a flash drive. That's for you, I said. A reminder that the dead don't stay buried forever. He left without taking it. 2 days later, Miss Hightower called. The board's moved fast, she said. They've suspended his license pending review. I didn't speak for a long time, just stared out the window, watching the first snow settle on the streets. Chicago looked clean again, honest, almost, but I wasn't celebrating yet, because the board's judgment wouldn't undo the damage to Jessica. I knew she'd come soon, and when she did, it wouldn't be to thank me. That night, I sat at the piano again and played softly, letting each note fade before the next began. I thought of Evelyn, of promises and pride, and of the strange, bitter satisfaction that comes when truth finally has a pulse. Then came the knock on the door. When I opened the door, the cold hit first. Then Jessica, hair undone, face flushed from the wind, eyes already glistening. She didn't say hello. She just walked past me into the living room, clutching her phone like a weapon. Why are you doing this? She said. Her voice cracked on the first word. I closed the door quietly, locking the sound of the city outside. Doing what, Jess? She turned, trembling. You filed a complaint against Raymond. You went to the board. Do you know what that means for him? For us. Us. Not you. Not me. Us. That word carried all the weight of her marriage, of the years I'd spent paying, praying, and pretending. I did what was right, I said. She shook her head. You've lost it. He told me you were confused, paranoid, that you've been imagining things. Dad, he showed me the paperwork. He showed me the diagnosis. I took a deep breath, the kind men take before they lift something heavy. Then he showed you the lie. Stop, she whispered, pressing her fingers to her temples. You're sick. I can't. I stepped closer, lowering my voice the way I used to when she was little and scared of thunderstorms. Jessica, look at me. Do I look like a dying man? She looked. She really looked, eyes scanning my face, my posture, the color in my cheeks. Doubt flickered there for the first time, faint but alive. Where's your proof? She asked. I walked to the piano, lifted the lid, and took out the envelope I'd hidden beneath the sheet music. Right here. She hesitated before taking it. Her hands shook as she pulled out the reports, scanning both pages, her lips moving silently as she read. The silence stretched, long and sharp. Finally, she whispered, "These could be fake." I nodded. They could. That's why I kept everything. Timestamps, emails, his prescriptions. It's all with the medical board now. Independent investigators verified it. Jessica sank into the couch, staring at the papers like they were written in another language. Why would he do this? He has everything. His job, his house, me. Because some men can't stand what they owe, I said quietly. And I made him feel small when I paid for that wedding. He smiled through it. But inside, he decided to get even. She looked up sharply. You think this is about money? It started there, I said. But it's about pride. You can't buy class, remember? Those were his words. Her face crumpled. For the first time since she'd walked in, she wasn't angry. She was afraid. What's going to happen to him? Whatever happens when truth finally catches up, I said. She stared at the floor for a long moment. Then she whispered, he told me you were like this after Mom died, that you couldn't let go, that you get obsessed. I smiled, bitter and tired. I used to get obsessed with fixing things that were broken. Guess some habits die harder than cancer. The words landed like stones between us. Jessica stood and walked to the window, arms crossed. Outside, snow was still falling, coating the street in a soft, merciless white. They suspended him, she said finally. He came home today furious, said his reputation's ruined. He thinks you did it out of jealousy. I didn't answer. Sometimes silence is sharper than words. She turned. Did you ever love him? Even a little? I tried, I said. Because you did. Her voice softened, almost childlike. What happens now? That's up to him, I said. And you? I thought she might cry, but she didn't. She just stood there, breathing quietly, the way Evelyn used to when she was trying not to shout. Finally, she said, he's gone too far. I can't ignore this. But if it's true, Dad, he'll lose everything. I nodded. And if it's not, I will. We didn't hug. She left the same way she'd arrived. Fast, angry, lost. The front door closed with a soft click, and the house went silent again. That night, I didn't play the piano. I sat on the couch with Evelyn's photograph on my lap and watched the clock tick toward midnight. Revenge, it turns out, doesn't come with peace. It just keeps you company in the dark. Still, there was one more thing left to do. The next morning, I got a call from Investigator Renfro. We're moving to a hearing, he said. They want both you and Dr. Ellis present. It'll be confidential. Internal review. When? I asked. Tomorrow morning, State Medical Board, downtown, 10 o'clock sharp. When I hung up, I realized my hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the weight of what was coming. I spent the night preparing, pressed my suit, shined my shoes, tucked Evelyn's note into my pocket. Don't let anyone make you feel smaller than you are. When I walked into that hearing room, it felt like entering a courtroom built out of silence. 3 board members sat behind a long table, papers neatly stacked, expressions unreadable. Raymond sat across from me, dressed to perfection, not a hair out of place. Jessica sat behind him, her hands folded, face pale. Mr. Turner, one of the board members began, thank you for your cooperation. We're here to review allegations of medical fraud, falsified documentation, and unethical manipulation of patient trust. Raymond cut in smoothly. Baseless claims from a grieving widower. The man's confused, possibly early-onset dementia. I was trying to help him manage his estate before his condition worsened. The words sliced through the air like scalpels. I looked at him, really looked. And in that moment, I didn't see the man who'd married my daughter. I saw the boy he must have been once, terrified of being powerless. The kind of boy who grows up promising himself he'll never owe anyone again. I took a slow breath and spoke clearly. I may be old, but I'm not senile. I didn't come here to argue. I came to show you something. I handed them the folder Ms. Hightower had prepared, timestamps, emails, the falsified report with metadata traces, and the clean one from St. Joseph's. One of the members adjusted his glasses. Dr. Ellis, can you explain why your lab submission lacks a verification signature? Raymond's jaw tightened. That must be a clerical error. Another member leaned forward. You submitted this under a hospital account ID that doesn't exist. The silence that followed was the sound of a man's future collapsing in real time. Jessica's breath caught. She turned to him, whispering something I couldn't hear. His face drained of color. The lead investigator spoke again. Dr. Ellis, pending further review, your medical license is suspended indefinitely. We will also be notifying the state attorney's office. Raymond stood suddenly. You can't do this. He's lying. I didn't move. No, Raymond, I said quietly. You were. He turned to Jessica. Desperate now. Jess, you know me. You know I wouldn't. But she was already crying. Not the soft kind. The kind that breaks years of pretending. She whispered, You made me doubt my father. He reached for her, but she stepped back. Security escorted him out. The echo of the door closing sounded like the final chord of a song no one wanted to hear. Afterward, Jessica and I walked outside together. The winter sun glared off the snow, blinding and clean. We stood on the courthouse steps, neither of us talking. Finally, she said, I don't know how to forgive this. Neither do I said, but at least now we know what we're forgiving. She wiped her face and nodded slowly. You were right. I smiled sadly. I'd have given anything to be wrong. We stood there for a long time, watching the city move around us. The traffic, the voices, the life that keeps going no matter who breaks. Then she said softly, Come over tonight. I'll make dinner. It was small, but it was enough. That night, I sat back at my piano. For the first time in months, I played not for Evelyn, not for revenge, but for myself. A slow hymn, hesitant at first, then strong. The phone buzzed once on the counter. Jessica texting that she loved me. Just that. No punctuation. I smiled. Looking back now, it was the exact second when revenge stopped breathing, and forgiveness started to take its first breath. When a man's private war ends, the silence can be deafening. 2 days after the hearing, the story hit the local news. Not the front page. Raymond wasn't famous enough for that, but buried just deep enough to sting. Prominent Chicago surgeon under investigation for medical fraud. No names in the headline, but anyone who knew us didn't need them. My phone started buzzing before sunrise. The first call was from Reggie. Harold, he said, I saw the news. You finally did it. I didn't do anything, I told him. I just stopped letting him do it. By mid-morning, neighbors were knocking, softly, politely, the way people do when they're not sure if you're the victim or the villain. Mrs. Jenkins from next door brought a pie I didn't ask for. We always knew something was off about that young man, she said, lowering her voice. Ain't right, tricking your own family. The thing about gossip is, it's rarely malicious in small doses. It's curiosity trying to dress itself as concern, but I didn't want pity. I wanted quiet, so I stopped answering the door. I spent my days reading, playing piano, and walking the block. Chicago's winter had started to thaw. Puddles formed along the curbs like mirrors. I liked seeing the city's reflection fractured, felt honest, somehow. Jessica called every evening. Sometimes we talked about nothing, weather, her job, what she'd cooked for dinner. Other times, silence filled the space between us like a wound neither of us could touch. One night, she said, they're talking about pressing charges. Against him? Yes. Fraud, malpractice, maybe financial coercion. It's bad, Dad. His colleagues have turned on him. I didn't answer right away. Justice feels different when it's real. Less like triumph, more like gravity. I never wanted prison, I said finally. Just truth. I know, she whispered. But truth drags consequences behind it. She paused, voice trembling. He's moved out. Said he needs time to rebuild. I don't even know what that means. It means he's finally facing himself, I said. Something I wish he'd done before he hurt you. There was a long silence. Then, softly, she said, You were right. About everything. I closed my eyes. I wish being right didn't cost so much. Weeks passed. The investigation widened. Reporters started calling. The hospital suspended Raymond permanently. His name vanished from the staff directory like it had never been there. Then one Sunday, I walked into New Trinity Baptist for the first time in months. The ushers greeted me like family, their smiles hesitant but warm. Pastor Caldwell met me at the door with his wide, knowing grin. Good to see you standing tall, Brother Turner. I'm trying, I said. You did what needed doing, he replied. Now you let God handle the rest. The choir was already singing when I took my seat. I hadn't realized how much I'd missed the sound of voices blending, different tones, same purpose. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was fighting something invisible. After service, Sister Marlene caught me near the exit. Heard the boards recommending permanent revocation, she said. That's rare. I didn't want that, I said. I know, she replied, but sometimes justice overcorrects before it balances. She patted my hand. Don't let this make you bitter, Harold. Bitterness is revenge's ugly cousin. I smiled faintly. I'll remember that. Spring came, slow and soft, the way forgiveness sometimes does. The city thawed, and so did the space between Jessica and me. One evening she showed up at my door with takeout, fried catfish and sweet tea. Thought we'd eat together, she said. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one Evelyn used to polish with lemon oil every Saturday. The air smelled like nostalgia and clean paper. I filed for divorce, Jessica said quietly. It's final next month. I nodded. How are you holding up? Better than I thought, she said. Worse than I hoped. We ate in silence for a while. Then she added, he sent me a letter. I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. What did it say? He said he's sorry, that he doesn't know why he did it, that he hated needing anyone. He wanted to prove he could control everything. I sighed. Control's a dangerous god. She nodded, eyes glistening. He said he still loves me. I looked at her, really looked. The tired beauty of a woman who'd aged 10 years in one. And what did you say back? I didn't. That night, after she left, I sat by the window watching the streetlights glow against the wet asphalt. I thought about how vengeance doesn't always end with punishment. Sometimes it ends when the person you love finally sees the truth on their own. That's when I realized something I hadn't dared admit until then. Revenge hadn't made me whole. It had only cleared the space where healing could finally start. A month later, a letter arrived from the state medical board. The formal decision, license permanently revoked, case closed. I read it twice, folded it neatly, and placed it in the same metal box where Evelyn's note still rested. That night, I took a walk to the park near the lake. The wind off the water was sharp, carrying the faint sound of the city. A train in the distance, a siren, laughter from somewhere I couldn't see. A young man was sitting on a bench, head in his hands, phone glowing in the dark. He looked up when I passed. Sir, you got a minute? I hesitated. Sure, he sighed. I just found out my girl's been cheating. Don't even know what to do. For a moment, I saw my younger self in him, hurt, angry, ready to scorch the earth to make the pain make sense. I sat down beside him. First thing, I said, don't act tonight. Hurt makes fools of honest men. Sit with it. Let the fire die down before you decide what to burn. He looked at me, puzzled but listening. You ever been through something like that? I smiled faintly. Something like that, yes. He nodded slowly, eyes thoughtful. Did you get even? I paused. In a way, but getting even isn't the same as getting free. He looked out at the lake. Did it help? Not at first, I said. But later, yeah, it helped me remember who I was before they broke me. He sat there quietly, then said, thanks, man. Take care of yourself, I told him, standing. As I walked away, I felt something shift inside me. Not guilt, not triumph, just release. The kind that comes when the story you've been living finally exhales. A week later, Jessica invited me to her place for Sunday lunch. She'd moved into a smaller apartment, plants on the windowsill, sunlight spilling through gauzy curtains, laughter from neighbors drifting in from the hall. When she opened the door, she was smiling, not forced, real. Come in, she said. I made your favorite, mac and cheese with extra crust. We ate, we talked, we laughed about old things. She played me a voicemail from one of Evelyn's old friends who'd just found out I was still around. For the first time in years, the word family didn't ache when I heard it. After lunch, she brought out an old photo album. We sat on the couch flipping through pages of lives that looked simpler than they really were. One picture stopped us both, Evelyn in her Sunday hat, laughing at something I'd said, sunlight bouncing off her ring. She'd be proud of you, Jessica said. I looked at the photo. She'd be proud of you too. You found your way back. Jessica leaned her head on my shoulder. We both did. Outside, the city hummed, alive, imperfect, still moving forward. That night, back home, I wrote a note and tucked it beside Evelyn's old one. It said, justice isn't revenge. It's memory set right. I closed the box, locked it, and slid it under the piano bench. Then I sat down and played. The melody came from nowhere, maybe from her, maybe from somewhere deeper. I let it fill the house until even the shadows seemed to listen. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for anything. No verdicts, no apologies, no ghosts, just the sound of music, the pulse of life. and the soft, steady rhythm of peace returning home. Peace, I learned, doesn't last forever. It drifts in like a visitor, sits for a while, then moves on before you can thank it. It was early summer when I heard from Raymond again. I'd been trimming the rose bushes out front, sweat beading under the brim of my hat, when I saw the envelope. No return address, just my name typed neatly across the front. I stood there in the heat, pruning shears dangling from my hand, staring at it like it might bite. Inside was a single page. Harold, I know I have no right to ask you for anything, but I need to see you, just once. There are things you don't know, things I need to tell you before it's too late. I'm at Mercy Rehabilitation Center, room 212. Raymond. My first instinct was to throw it away. Then I read it again, and again. The handwriting, small, deliberate, unsteady, didn't look like the man I remembered. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the wedding, the clinic, the hearing, the look on Jessica's face when she finally believed me. Seeing him again felt like digging up a grave, but the part of me that had spent a lifetime fixing things couldn't ignore a broken man asking for help. The next morning, I put on my gray suit, the same one I'd worn to his hearing, and drove to Mercy. Hospitals always smell like regret, sterile and heavy, the air too clean to be honest. A nurse pointed me to his room. When I stepped inside, I barely recognized him. Raymond sat by the window in a wheelchair, a blanket over his legs. His hair was thinner, face drawn, eyes dulled by something beyond shame. He turned when he heard me. "You came," he said, voice hoarse. "I read your letter," I replied. He tried to smile, but it broke halfway. "I didn't think you would. I almost didn't." He nodded slowly, looking down at his hands that once held scalpels steady, now trembling slightly. "They found out everything," he said quietly. "The fake reports, the forged emails, even the offshore account I was using to move your funds. It's all gone. My license, my reputation, my home. I'm on probation and I have nothing left." I stood there, listening to him confess the ruins of his own life, but my heart didn't rejoice. Revenge doesn't gloat, it just stands there, hollow, waiting to feel something. "What do you want from me, Raymond?" He looked up. "Forgiveness." The word hung in the air like smoke. "I don't deserve it," he said. "I know that, but I can't live with what I did. I thought I hated you for making me feel small. I told myself I was just getting even, but really I was terrified. You had what I never did, respect without credentials. People looked at you and saw a man. People looked at me and saw a title. I didn't move. You could have asked for help. I didn't know how," he said. "I was raised to believe weakness is failure. The first time I met you, you shook my hand and looked me in the eye like we were equals. I couldn't stand it, so I tried to take that power from you. I thought if I broke you, I'd finally feel whole." He looked away, voice cracking, but all I did was destroy myself. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of machines, the soft shuffle of nurses outside. "I'm dying," he said finally. "Real diagnosis this time. Liver failure. I've got 6 months, maybe less." The words hit me harder than I expected. He wasn't lying. His face told the truth no report could fake. "I don't want your pity," he added quickly. "I just needed to say it out loud. To you, the man I wronged most." I sat down across from him, folding my hands. "What do you want from me, Raymond? An apology in return? Some blessing to die in peace?" He shook his head. "No, just tell Jessica I'm sorry. She won't take my calls. I can't blame her." "You could tell her yourself," I said. He met my eyes. "She won't come, but maybe she'll listen to you." That was the moment, the crossroads between mercy and pride. I dreamed of this man begging me once. I thought it would feel righteous. Instead, it felt heavy, like holding someone else's guilt in my hands. I stood. "I can't promise what she'll do," I said, "but I'll tell her you tried." He nodded, tears wetting the corners of his eyes. "That's more than I deserve." I turned to leave, but he called after me. "Harold?" I stopped at the door. "You were right," he said softly. "Money doesn't buy class." For the first time, the words didn't sting. They sounded like confession. When I told Jessica, she didn't speak for a long time. We were sitting in her apartment again, the same spot by the window where we'd eaten dinner weeks earlier. "He's dying?" she asked finally. "Yes." She looked down at her hands. "Did he ask to see me?" "He did, but he didn't expect you would." She nodded slowly. "He's right. I don't think I can." "That's okay," I said. "You don't owe him anything." Her eyes filled with tears. "But you went." "Why?" I thought about it, about Evelyn's note in my pocket, the piano, the years I'd spent holding grudges like they were heirlooms, because I needed to know if he was still human. I said, "Turns out he is, just a broken kind." She leaned back, silent for a long time. Then she whispered, "Do you think people can change?" "I think they can see," I said. "Whether that's enough? I don't know." She exhaled, long and shaky. "I hate him, but I don't know. I hate myself for missing him." I reached across the table and took her hand. "That's not weakness, Jess. That's grief trying to find its balance." We sat there until the room dimmed with evening. She didn't say she'd visit him, but when I left I saw her staring out the window, lost in a decision only time could make. 3 weeks later, I got another letter. This one from Jessica. "Dad, I went to see him today. He looked terrible, but he said thank you for sending me. I told him I don't forgive him, but I don't hate him anymore either." He cried. I cried, and for a minute, it felt like something heavy finally left the room. I don't know what happens after this, but I know you were right about one thing. Revenge ends, truth stays, and maybe that's enough. Love you always, Jess. I folded the letter carefully and placed it beside the others in my box. Later that night, I drove back to the lake. The water was calm, the city lights reflecting across it like scattered stars. I stood there for a long while, thinking about all the years I'd spent defining justice as something sharp. But sometimes justice isn't a sword, it's a mirror. You just have to be brave enough to look. I whispered to the wind, "You can rest now, Evelyn. It's done." 2 months later, Raymond died quietly in his sleep. Jessica attended the small service at the rehab chapel. I didn't. Some goodbyes are best spoken in silence. Afterward, she brought me a sealed envelope. "He left this for you," she said. Inside was a single photograph, our family at the wedding, all of us smiling, unaware of what was coming. On the back he'd written, "You gave me a chance to be a better man even at the end. Thank you for not turning away." I stared at the photo for a long time before placing it inside the box with everything else. Evelyn's note, the report, Jessica's letter, my whole story, captured in paper and ink. That night, I sat at the piano and played one last song for him, not out of forgiveness, but because music is what you play when words fail. And for the first time, I didn't feel like a man seeking revenge. I felt like a man who had finally survived it. I used to think endings came with fanfare, the tidy bow, the final note. The truth is quieter. It's the morning after a storm, when you step onto the porch and notice the way the light has changed. You breathe, and for the first time in a long time, the air doesn't fight you back. Summer settled over Chicago with its usual swagger. Street vendors returned to the corners, the church doors were propped open after service, and the lake took on that particular blue that makes the skyline feel like a painting. I started rising early, the way I used to when Evelyn and I would walk before the buses woke the streets. My house felt less like a museum and more like a home again. The piano was tuned. The envelopes in the metal box were organized. Even my suits seemed to sit on their hangers with less weight. One Tuesday, Pastor Caldwell called. "Brother Turner," he said, voice humming like a bass line. "It's time to bless what you planted." He meant the scholarship. The papers were final. New Trinity's kids would have help for community college, trade programs, the kinds of practical bridges that carry you out of a neighborhood without teaching you to despise where you came from. They asked me to say a few words at the announcement. I said I'd try not to cry. He laughed like he knew better. That Sunday, I stood at the podium beneath the simple wooden cross, the sanctuary warm with breath and memory. The lights were kinder than those in any courtroom. Sister Marlene sat near the front, arms folded, eyes soft. Ms. Hightower gave me that almost smile that means keep going. You're doing fine. The choir fanned themselves with programs and nodded like old judges. I cleared my throat. Evelyn and I built a house in 1985, I began. We built a life too. Some of what we built lasted, some didn't. That's how life is. This, I lifted the folder, is a promise that the work we start doesn't stop when we do. If you're a young person who's ever been told you're not enough, this is me telling you. Someone you'll never meet believed you could be. Applause started like rain on a porch roof, polite at first, then rolling, genuine. I felt my eyes sting. Not grief, not exactly. Gratitude's old cousin. Later, in the fellowship hall, kids lined up with paper plates and questions. A tall boy asked me whether HVAC certification was real money. A shy girl wanted to know if she could study nursing part-time and still sing in the choir. I gave the best answers I could. I told the boy real money is what you can live with. I told the girl choir harmonies carry medicine too. People pressed my hands, hugged me, slipped memories into my pockets like folded prayers. Halfway through the cake, Jessica arrived, late but glowing. Time had given her back a little softness, the laughter returning to its natural register. She hugged me like I was sturdy, not breakable. "I brought something," she said, and held up a small foil pan, her mother's peach cobbler recipe. She'd never tried to make it before. We ate it standing up, the way Evelyn would have fussed at us for, and I swore I could taste the past without choking on it. But I had a plan that no one, not even myself, could have predicted. 2 days later, a letter came from a law firm I didn't recognize. I set it on the kitchen table, poured coffee, and let it sit for a minute like a stranger at church who might be lost or might be looking for salvation. When I finally opened it, there were 2 pages. The first was dry as dust, estate closure notification. The second was a surprise. Raymond had left a small life insurance policy to Jessica. Not much, but not nothing. She hadn't known. There was a handwritten note attached to the bottom in a clerk's careful script. Beneficiary requested that any claim be made without ceremony. No contact required. I called Jessica. "You should come by," I said. "We've got paperwork." She came that evening. We read it together at the table. She went quiet in that way that means feelings have entered the room and are looking for chairs. "I don't know how to feel," she said. "It feels like bribery from the grave. It also feels like, I don't know, the one thing he managed to do clean. Maybe it's both," I said. "People are messy all the way down." We sat with it. She decided to accept it and donate a portion to the scholarship fund. "Not because I'm noble," she said, "because I'm tired of letting his choices define whether good things happen." Looking back now, it was the exact second when legacy started breathing inside me. I hadn't thought much about legacy before all this. Men like me usually call it the will and keep it in a drawer. But I began to see legacy as the shape your life leaves in other people. Some shapes bruise, some shelter. I wanted mine to be a porch roof in a storm. That summer, I started volunteering at the church twice a week. Ms. Hightower ran a legal clinic on Wednesdays for folks with landlord trouble or benefits confusion. I wasn't a lawyer, but I knew paperwork. I also knew how to sit across from a person and make them feel like they weren't wasting anyone's time. On Fridays, I met with scholarship applicants. We didn't just talk grades. We talked about alarm clocks, transit routes, childcare. We made plans that could survive getting rained on. What surprised me most wasn't the gratitude. It was the trust. People trusted me again, maybe more than before. Not because I was strong, but because I'd been seen breaking and didn't try to hide it. One afternoon, a man in a Cubs cap lingered by the door after the clinic. "You the one did that thing with the doctor?" he asked, cautious like the edges might still be sharp. I nodded. "I'm the one who kept breathing." He laughed once, short and real. "I got a son. He don't listen to me much, thinks I'm just old noise. But he listened when I told him your story. Said it sounded like a movie." He tilted his head. "You ever think about writing it down?" "Writing what down?" "All of it," he said. "The hurt, the fix, the not quite forgiveness thing. Folks need maps when they get lost. You got a map." I went home and thought about that. Then I did what I always do when I can't solve a problem. I sat at the piano. I played until the edges of the thought wore down and the shape of it was less frightening. That night, I took a notebook from the drawer, the same kind of cheap spiral I'd used when I started collecting evidence, and I began writing. Not poetry, not philosophy, just sentences that told the truth, and sat there politely without needing to be the loudest person in the room. Halfway through that first chapter, a thought interrupted me like a knock at midnight. I almost stopped there. Almost. But what I did instead shocked even me. I called the young nurse who'd checked me in at St. Joseph's under my mother's name. Her name was Kiara. She had eyes like someone who'd already seen more than her years asked her to. I asked if she'd let me buy her coffee. "I owe you a thank you," I said. We met at a cafe on 53rd that does the kind of cinnamon rolls that make your dentist shake his head. Kiara told me she was finishing her degree. We talked about the difference between preventing harm and repairing it. I told her what it meant as an old man to be believed before he earned it. She said, "That's nursing." I said, "That's church." We both laughed. Before we left, she said, "Mr. Turner, can I ask something? How did you know you weren't dying? Like, really know?" "I didn't," I said. "I just knew I wasn't ready to stop living." She wrote that down in her phone like it might be a dosage. Maybe it is. Autumn arrived with its own drumline, marching bands at Saturday games, leaves cracking underfoot, the church potluck expanding to a harvest table that required geometry to navigate. Jessica started taking an evening class in community health administration. "I want to be useful someplace that looks like where I'm from," she said. I told her there's no such thing as small usefulness. She smiled and told me I was getting preachy. We both laughed because I still had hard days. Grief doesn't vacate, it sublets. Some mornings I woke with the weight of what was done to me and what I'd done in return pressing on my chest. I'd pour coffee, open the metal box, and reread Evelyn's note. "Don't let anyone make you feel smaller than you are." Each word felt like a rung on a ladder I could climb out of dark with. Once, I dreamed of Raymond, not as a villain, not as a patient, just as a man standing in a hospital corridor, hands empty. In the dream, he didn't speak. He just nodded at me like a neighbor in an elevator. I woke up with tears drying on my cheeks and the strange, unearned relief you get when a long argument ends. Not because anyone won, but because both people ran out of reasons to shout. In late October, at the scholarship dinner, the first group of recipients took the stage. They were nervous, beautiful, reckless with possibility. A girl in a blue dress read a short speech and stumbled on the word beneficiary. The room laughed kindly, and she grinned, owning it. A young man named Andre thanked Mr. Harold for showing up like a grandfather with a briefcase. I pretended I had dust in my eye. Maybe I did. After the applause, Pastor Caldwell asked me to come forward. "Say something the young folks can take with them," he said. I cleared my throat. "All right. If you remember nothing else, remember this. Don't let the worst thing done to you become the truest thing about you. And when you can't forgive yet, choose not to lie. There's a freedom in refusing to pretend." The room went quiet in that particular way truth earns. Then the choir director's mother, 92 and unbothered by social cues, said, "Say that again," and we all laughed. And I did. Winter returned. As always, it tested our patience and our knees. I bought a better hat and learned to walk slower. Jessica decorated a small tree in her apartment and insisted I hang the star. I did, and for a second my heart ached with how tall the world still was. On Christmas Eve, after midnight service, we stood outside the church, breath puffing like smoke signals. Jessica tucked her arm through mine. "Dad," she said, "do you ever regret going so far? The board, the hearing, all of it. Every day," I said, and she looked startled until I added, "and not once." We both smiled at the contradiction that had kept me human. We walked home under a sky clear enough to pretend we could touch the cold stars. The house lights along the street blinked like small, organized hope. I unlocked my door, stepped inside, and the familiar warmth found me like an old friend. I pulled out the metal box. I added a new page to the papers inside, dated, signed, and simple. I thought revenge would feel like a trumpet. It felt like a drumbeat instead, steady, necessary, marching me forward while my heart learned a new song. Justice is memory, set right. Dignity is the quiet you keep when the noise fades. I set the box back in its place and sat at the piano. Fingers found the keys the way old friends find each other in crowded rooms. The melody that came was both prayer and paycheck, something you owe and something that pays you back. I played until the only movement in the house was the metronome pulse of the radiator and the soft shiver of the picture frames when a bus rolled by. This is where I leave you. Not at a wedding, not in a courtroom, not in a hospital corridor, but at a piano, in a modest house on a Chicago street where the mailman knows your name and the corner store saves the last paper for you. I'm not a hero. I'm a man who kept breathing long enough to watch the truth do its quiet work. If you're listening to this somewhere in your own storm, borrow my breath for a minute. Stand up, drink water, write things down, tell one person the truth, just one. If they don't believe you, tell it to yourself again tomorrow. And if you need a sign that you will make it through this without becoming smaller, let an old man's voice be it. Now, do me a favor. Tell me where you're hearing this from. Your city and state. I want to see the map of folks who refuse to let their dignity be co-signed away. Drop it in the comments, then hit subscribe so this story finds the next person standing in a quiet room with a loud fear. We've got work to do, you and me. Not revenge work, legacy work. The last thing I'll say is the first thing Evelyn ever taught me. Class isn't money, or a building, or a suit. It's how you carry the unbearable with your back straight and your hand out for the next person in line. It's how you put the note in the pocket before you go out into the world. Don't let anyone make you feel smaller than you are. I left it there tonight, tucked against my heart, and when the clock chimed 12, I turned off the lamp, smoothed the keys with my palm like a blessing, and went to bed in a house that felt safe again. Outside, the city kept breathing. Inside, I did too.